So you've been doing this, you said, for a decade, primarily at MIT. Glassdoor is one of the principal sources. Um, what's jumped out to you? Like, what shocked you? Or I don't know, just been like something like, whoa, didn't expect to see that. When you started to now.
That's a big question. I mean, there are individual things in the Glassdoor data that are surprising. So, for instance, if you look at Glassdoor data in the financial industry, even about 10 years after the huge Wells Fargo fraud scandal, employees on Glassdoor from Wells Fargo are still about two or three standard deviations more likely to criticize unethical behavior than in
Wow.
other major banks. So it's like I have a million little things like that. I find those every day. But I would say bigger picture doing this work for a decade is two things. One, how little most top leaders prioritize culture, how little this is on the agenda, even though when you think back to at least how we think about culture, it's this operating system that's governing countless value creating behaviors. And there's all this research about the financial impact of culture. I mean, the majority of CEOs and CFOs, according to a large, really well done Duke study, think that culture is a top three driver of financial value creation. There's this great study done by Alex Edmonds, who was at Wharton at the time, that found that a strong culture is associated with the 24% total shareholder return premium over 5 years, which for a big company is,
Wow.
tens of
That's
billions of
insane.
dollars. Yeah, it's a huge impact. So, but what's interesting is even though on some level everyone's like, oh yeah, culture is important, um, it's really not prioritized very much at the firm level. And when it is prioritized, employers will think of this mostly as a purely employee experience phenomenon.
Right.
So there's
Yeah.
kind of a lack of understanding of what culture even is, and that contributes to the lack of prioritization that you see in most companies, especially after the Great Resignation ended, right? So now it's not hard to retain employees anymore, and that was the main reason why a lot of companies were prioritizing culture in the first place. So that reason just completely went away, and now culture is less prioritized than ever. So that was one of the big lessons, and then the second big lesson is this one's more surprising to me. So you have this situation in companies where at least everyone gives nominal lip service to culture. Everyone's like, "Oh yeah, culture, that's important." But even in the biggest, most sophisticated companies in the world, there's very, very basically no understanding of what even their own culture actually is.
Yeah.
And that was fascinating to me when I just when we started doing this, we were like, okay, this will maybe provide some additional insight. Maybe this will help people a little bit. But the more we did this, the more we realized that there's very little understanding of what a company's culture is at the senior level, even the person in charge of employee listening. And a lot of this comes back to a lack of prioritization, and a lot of it also comes back to this outdated instrument that people are using to measure culture. This
Yeah.
100-year-old tool that is still, even in these very sophisticated leading companies, is still how people are doing it. So those would probably be my two big picture surprises.
There's so much came to mind for me. One, I had an experience of working with a company in games, and I was put in touch. Me and my partner were put in touch with their culture leader, and we were like, "Oh, great! He'll talk to us about." And we think about it more in the way that you described, that culture is sort of the summation of behaviors, or what you described as the operating system. It's like how do people sort of expect to behave, and what's okay and what's not okay, and all these like norms of behavior type things. Um, and so we sat down. We were like hoping to get some good insight into the culture, and it turned out he was the guy who like scheduled the yearly trip, and he made sure that they all like
Yeah.
had the like dinner out some number of times. It was, we were like, okay, I guess that's fine. But to your point, that is still, and this wasn't like I don't know, some backwards company, right? This was a
Yeah.
modern company trying to do the right thing, and their culture expert was more interested in like planning, a vacation for everybody than they were, well, what's actually going on? Like, how does this how does our company culture impact the employees, the outcomes, all these different things. So that's one thing that came to mind for me. You mentioned leadership a lot in there, and you said like leaders aren't taking this seriously, and part of that is because even if you give lip service, you just don't understand your own culture. And the thing I thought about earlier when you mentioned Glassdoor was, well, shoot, if a simple thing you could do is just go read Glassdoor reviews of your company and kind of leave behind the myth that this is bad data or this is negatively biased or whatever, and actually just know, like, just take this seriously. Go read those reviews, and you might have better insight than this old, outdated survey that you've been probably giving your employees once a year for the last who knows how many years. Um, but yeah, I guess like why don't they do that? What stop? Do you know? Have you talked to people about like why don't you take this more seriously or dive into the space of why do we have a toxic culture? Why is it functioning or not?
Yeah, I mean, for me, a lot of it comes back to a lack of effective measurement and a lack of good data. I mean, the reason the CFO is so powerful in most companies is because he or she is, working with this really tangible, really important data that everyone can recognize is measurable and relevant. That doesn't exist for culture, even though culture is arguably in most firms probably their single most important asset. So what doesn't get measured doesn't get acted on, and there's okay, you have this measurement with the traditional 1 to 5 point scale survey, but it's really hard to do anything with that. I mean, it gets acted on a little bit maybe. So there's culture also just has a PR problem. Everyone is if you go on LinkedIn, everyone has an opinion on culture. There are 10,000 armchair opinions about what culture is and what you should do about it, why it matters. Virtually none of them are grounded in any evidence or any credible thinking. And I think culture kind of in a lot of companies gets dismissed as something like astrology. Okay, like the stars are important. They govern
Yeah,
your life, but it's just so mystical and intangible that we can't really do anything about it. So I think part of the solution to getting people to care more about culture uh, is to make it more tangible and to actually bring good data into this equation and to have it be evidence based and to have it be credible. And if you can do that, then you have a better shot at prioritization. But another issue is it's a mindset shift. I mean, if you look at the typical CEO of a company right now is 55 or 60 years old. When they went to business school, there were no classes about culture. Even today, there are very few classes in business school about culture. This just wasn't a part of your training. It's maybe something
yeah.
you give lip service to, but you're not being trained in it in the same way that you would be trained in, for instance, strategy execution. Um, so it's about overcoming that PR problem, shifting the mindset, making people realize the value of culture and what culture actually is, and injecting this high quality data into the equation so that you can measure this intangible asset just as effectively as you could measure a tangible asset that matters so much.
Love it. Yeah.